It was November 6, 1835, and the schooner Mary Jane had just left New Orleans harbor. However, the men on the Mary Jane were not traders, immigrants, or fishermen. Instead, they were expeditionaries, tasked with the job to capture the port city of Tampico in an effort to stir up an insurrection in Mexico as part of the Texas Revolution. And if the expedition is to succeed, it could drastically change the course of Texas history and would become known as the Tampico Expedition. One of the least understood aspects of the Texas Revolution is that it was part of a larger Mexican Civil War between Centralist and Federalist factions. After the Mexican Congress elected General Santa Anna as president of Mexico in 1833, he appointed Valentin Gomez Farias as his vice president, and Santa Anna went into political retirement, turning over much of the governing of Mexico to his vice president. However, Gomez began implementing liberal reforms, particularly impacting the Mexican Army and Catholic Church. These reforms angered the powerful conservative forces in Mexico, who urged Santa Anna to abandon his retirement and stop the liberalization, to which Santa Anna agreed, and he would force Gomez and his Federalist supporters to flee into exile in the United States. When the Texas Revolution began in October 1835, a majority of the Texas colonists remained loyal to Mexico, and Texian delegates of the consultation, which governed Mexican Texas during the Revolution, were not interested in independence and were more concerned with fighting for the restoration of the Mexican Constitution of 1824. This statement inspired Santa Anna's exiled opponents in the United States, and one of these men was Mexican General Jose Antonio Mexia. Mexia was originally a supporter of Santa Anna, however, he didn't support centralism. See, when Santa Anna was elected president of Mexico, he did so on a Federalist platform, and many, including the Texian people, were fooled by this. When Santa Anna's politics started to change from federalism to centralism, Mexia participated in an 1834 uprising against Santa Anna, and 2 months later, he was captured by centralist forces and sent into exile. He would later travel to New Orleans, where he hatched a plan to invade Mexico. Mexia's plan was to lead an expedition to attack the Mexican port town of Tampico in an effort to stir up an insurrection in the eastern states of Mexico, and began to raise a military force there. By October 29, 1835, Mexia wrote to the delegates of the consultation to inform them of his expedition, and that he had commissioned the armored schooner Mary Jane to transport his expedition. Many Texians supported the expedition. However, some Texians, including Stephen F. Austin, advocated an attack on Matamoros instead. They would leave New Orleans on November 6, 1835, with a force of approximately 150 men, along with a company of 52 grenadiers, a 42-man company of sharpshooters, 33 French and Creole volunteers known as the Company of Liberty, and a Marine Corps consisting of 15 men. However, the men knew little of what their goal was. According to several participants, the men had been told that they were going to Texas to support his fight against the Centralists, and once they were at sea, Mexia informed them that his true plan was to capture Tampico, a revelation that surprised and shocked his recruits. But they agreed to liberate Tampico with the understanding that after, they would be taken to Texas. They would arrive on November 14, 1835, in the middle of a storm that caused the Mary Jane to run aground. Hoping to save the ship, Mexia ordered his men to throw some of the artillery and other supplies overboard, believing that lightening the load would free the ship, but there was nothing they could do, and the ship fell apart. After all of that had happened, John M. Allen, captain of the Mary Jane, and shipmaster Richard Hall went ashore with 6 sailors to contact the military fort that protected Tampico, while Mexia and his supporters waited ashore and spent their time drying off. The 24-man garrison not only quickly surrendered the fort and its 3 24-pound cannons, they switched sides and joined the expedition. However, the bulk of the Tampico garrison, commanded by Gregory Gomez Palomino, remained loyal to the centralist government. They knew of Mexia's landing and fortified the Tampico customs house. The Federalist troops made their way into Tampico and would arrive at the customs house. Shooting began when a sentinel outside discovered the Federalists approaching. The garrison began firing their cannon, killing 2 of Mexia's men in the process. The Federalists rushed the cannon, killing 3 of the defenders. Mexia's men captured the customs house and its 2 pieces of artillery, forcing the defenders to retreat to a nearby fort. After they had captured the customs house, discontent began to grow among the ranks of the Federalists, and Mexia decided to retreat back towards the fort they originally captured, and were unmolested for 10 days. As time passed, their expected Federalist reinforcements never showed up, and added on with little ammunition and food, the troops under Mexia's command began to become more and more unhappy. In the face of all these difficulties, Mexia decided that he and the remaining men would leave Tampico to go to Texas and follow up the campaign against the Centralist forces there. They would leave on November 28, 1835, on the American schooner Halcyon, and would arrive at the mouth of the Brazos River on December 3rd. However, not all of Mexia's men escaped to Texas. 31 of the men who were taken prisoner were left at Tampico. 3 would die of their wounds, and the remaining 28, despite pleas for clemency from diplomats and the men themselves, were executed on December 14, 1835. This event, despite it being hundreds of miles away from Texas, changed the course of the Texas Revolution. Mexia's defeat convinced many Texians that Mexico's Federalists were no help to the Texian cause, thereby causing hard feelings to arise between these potential allies. Furthermore, the Mexican government declared that the expedition had been carried out by pirates, and this policy of no quarter was extended to the Texas situation in the pronouncement of the Tornel decree, which stated that any foreigner fighting against the Mexican government would be deemed as a pirate and dealt with as such.